Okay, and welcome back to Chat with the Mindful Beekeepers, y'all, from Austin, Texas, where it's 100 something. And I've got Les Crowder, and we're going to help you out with your questions and see if we can share with you lessons over 50 years worth of expertise in beekeeping and help you out with various things. So don't hesitate to jump in and ask your questions, either audio or on the chat window. You can raise your hand. You can do it also on YouTube if you're with us on YouTube, and then I'll monitor that as well. So today we are going to talk about all kinds of things, I'm sure, but we'll start with the theme for the day, which is conversion. And how to leverage large colonies to make those happen even faster. We got a new trick that we want to talk about today. And we'll also give you caveats and tips and tricks on the standard conversions on the full-size top bar hives. But with that, Les, welcome back, and thank you for being here with us. Thank you, everybody, for dialing in and for joining us from a little bit everywhere here around the US, but mostly Texas. And don't forget, when you are asking us questions, if we don't know where you're from, to give us a little bit of background on your season location so that we can better customize the answers. So, Les, with this.
Thank you, Natalie. And a lot of people have asked me about converting, and the reasons are often they've tried to go to foundationless langs because they want to get away from foundation.
You want to explain converting what for those who haven't seen that before, maybe potentially?
Yeah, if you have Langstroth hives, we're not trying to convert you to be Republican or Democrat or
no.
particular religion. We're talking about Langstroth and top bar beekeeping. And the problem is that the combs don't fit, right? They're different shaped boxes, different depths. And so the combs you can't just take the combs out of one and put them in the other. So you have to get the bees to build comb from one to the other or whatever. And a lot of people start going down the road with their Langstroths and deciding they want to do without plastic foundation, and then without foundation because they don't want to restrict the cell size. They want the bees to be free to build whatever cell size they want. And so then they go to foundationless laying, and that can work pretty well. I've worked a little bit with people with foundationless laying. What I find is that, personally for me, it seems like it can combine some of the worst of both. You still have the frame, and then you have a comb that often isn't connected very well to the frame. So you still have to be very delicate and careful. Sometimes it's pretty well connected, and you can lift it up and kind of tip it sideways and everything. But often the comb is hanging and not connected to the frame. And now you got the added complication of the frame, but you still have to treat it somewhat like a top bar. But anyway, Natalie and I have prevailed on enough people and hammered away with our bias that we've got a number of people wanting to convert and try top bar hives, but they've already got a few langs. And often what they do is they wind up with both. They buy or build a top bar hive and get some bees in it, either swarm or a package, which is easy because that can pour into any shape box and fit the box. But then we'll get people who say, well, either they've ordered nukes, Langstroth nukes, or they have their own top bar hives, Langstroth hives, but they want to try to convert them into top bar hives. And so I've come up over the years with different ways of doing that. I started off just using the Langstroth hive leave it intact, set up the top bar hive, get a comb from another top bar hive that's empty, or maybe has brood, brood on it, but I've brushed all the bees off of it, put it in the top bar, the empty top bar hive, and then gone over and sugar brushed every bee out of the Langstroth hive, including the queen. I mean, if I see her, I carefully pick her up and place her, or even put her in a cage and cage her. I would probably cage her these days here because the bees in Texas are more prone to absconding than they used to be in New Mexico or California. But anyway, so I'd carefully make sure I got the queen in the top bar hive, brush all the bees off of all the combs, out of the lang into the top bar hive, put the lang right back together at the original site. And now all the field bees would come back and finish raising the queen. I would generally do this when they started raising the queen anyway, so that then they'd finish raising the queen. Basically what I did is I shook a swarm or forced a swarm out of a Langstroth into a top bar hive. I gave them a comb, made sure they had their queen, and it most often took. And so then I just used the Langstroth hive as a source of bees. Then I get full, get swarmy. As soon as I start building queen cells, I'd force a swarm. And in a good year, I could do it 3 or 4 times a year. I had taken a double, because in New Mexico, we used to run double deeps as brood boxes. Here in Texas, you can overwinter on 1 deep box easy. So then what I did is I would put the queen I would split the double into 2, put the queen in the new site, let them both raise the queen, or let one raise the queen and one keep the queen, and then wait for them, either or both of them, to get swarmy. I just started shaking, brushing swarms. And I found that I probably made quite a few hives that way during this spring and summer. I generally quit around the solstice, which is coming right up, because that was when there would be very little time left in New Mexico for a brand new hive to get ready for winter. And they needed to get, pretty close to having 2 double deeps full. And that was back in those days, they could make a fair amount of honey. But anyway, solstice is when I stopped, because also the shortening of the days, the bees do notice the shortening of the days. And it does make them slightly less inclined to swarm. Now here in Texas, it's not as noticeable because the days aren't so much longer. Further north you go, the more exaggerated the length of the day and the shortness of the night is. And the bees really notice it even more. And as you approach the tropics, it becomes less and less of an issue. And tropical bees don't really seem to pay as much attention to day length as they do the abundant availability of flowers for swarming. So it just depends, but that's one way. But then the other thing that we've come up with was, well, I would just take a little top bar hive, put it on top of a Langstroth top, screw it to the top, drill a hole, 2-inch hole through both hive, the bottom of the top bar hive and the top of the Langstroth lid. So that basically you could put the lid on. Now they had a 2-inch hole up into the Langstroth super. Mm-hmm. I mean, up into the top bar, super. Then I would hang a comb right over that hole, which would draw them right up very easily. And then start building in the top bar super on top of the Langstroth brood box. And then if I could catch the queen up there, I could throw a queen excluder in there. Generally, I had to keep exporting comb because they'd fill it with honey,
yeah,
a little bit of brood. They'd have to take honey out and keep the queen laying up in the top section. And then once I could throw the queen excluder in there, keep her out of the Langstroth section, then I could harvest all the honey out of the Langstroth section, put the bees in the little top bar hive into a full-size top bar hive, and now they were converted from a Langstroth to a top bar hive. Now, since then, Natalie's come up with a horizontal method that works really well, especially when we're dealing with nukes. I might let her explain that a little bit, just because really was her idea.
Well, and I like that initial conversion, vertical conversion, basically, where you have the Langstroth underneath the top bar. And I think that the queen excluder is a good idea, because what I saw when I used one of those before was they were using it as honey super, basically, like you were saying. And also it got super heavy, and it's attached to that telescopic cover or migratory cover or whichever cover. And sometimes it makes it a little bit, heavy and cumbersome to remove, to go and see what's going on underneath. So being, not having as much upper body strength, maybe I decided I was going to try to do the vertical conversion, which is how we ended up using the Langstroth nukes, the 5-frame, 4-frame nukes that are being sold every spring. And if you don't want to start your top bar hive with a package, which is another option, but you want to convert a nuke that's going to have a head start on the season, you can remove the end piece of your top bar hive. Imagine it's a little bit, longer, 4 feet long or whatever. And then you affix that Langstroth nuke to it, open up the entire opening and let them expand straight into the top bar hive horizontally. That requires nectar flow, obviously. And then if your queen doesn't readily move in and they're starting to store too much honey there, you can also do the same thing and have them use a queen excluder between the Langstroth nuke and the top bar hive, and pop the queen on the top bar hive side of things to encourage them to build into the top bar hive and having all the brood in there. Excuse me. And so that was this year's iteration, and it works really well. But then not everybody wants to mess with cutting up, the Langstroth boxes, or detaching the end of your top bar to put it underneath, or maybe it doesn't work. So the next iteration that we came up with is the Langstroth to top bar conversion kits. You're basically just a unit where you have a 5-frame nuke, and then you have the top bar nuke attached to it and a hole. So when you have colonies that expand, so that was a more permanent version of that little easy conversion nuke, easy 5-frame nuke, corrugated plastic conversion. That's a little bit more permanent for those of people that don't want to mess with that. I know Richard has also done the same thing with the long version of the hive and made a permanent attachment with a 5-frame nuke. Now, the next iteration of this is you don't want to necessarily buy nukes just for that purpose. You don't necessarily want to split your large colonies for this purpose to put a nuke into that box, or you don't want to mess with opening your hive and putting the shelf underneath and the support, all the stuff, right? So the next iteration is you can simply take, let's say you have a large 10-frame, 8-frame, it doesn't matter, double deep, triple deeps, deep and a medium, whatever, Langstroth colony that you don't want to take apart. So you're going to just take that little box and you're going to affix it directly to your Langstroth colony and drill that hole with a hole saw right there in the side of it. And you're going to manage your colony so that you have next to the top bar, again, the brood frames that are pushing towards the top bar expansion, the food on the other side and potentially above. And if really they're a little bit recalcitrant to moving into the top bar, you can put a little piece of queen excluder over that hole and put that queen in there, and they'll build and everything will become basically food storage in the large colony, or you still have a bunch of bees that are working and gathering food, pollen, nectar, honey, all this stuff, right? And then the large size colony can generate a split, meaning you can keep the queen in there, growing the bees over and over again. And then when you're ready to take a split from a large colony that's getting congested, they will have built out the comb. You can pop that queen in there. And if you don't have already the brood, you will have to use that queen excluder and wait a little bit longer for them to fill it with eggs and brood. But that's one way to leverage a very large colony with the strength of that colony to accelerate that build on the little top bar nuke, which becomes just basically that large Langstroth is a brood factory. And it will help build out more probably splits that way by keeping that Langstroth large and powerful. And then you can pull out the top bar nukes as you go one by one. Maybe you can pull out one or two depending on your season and your area and the strength of your colony. But in theory, you should be able to pull out at least once a season, and that doesn't disrupt your Langstroth colony. It's not hard to do. It's super easy. You can use the same plants that we have on Be Mindful and just use either 1-inch lumber to make it light or 2-inch lumber if you want it really permanent and overwintering with insulation at that point, right? So Les, I've got a question real quick from Richard, and then we can circle back with you to talk about this. Richard?
Thanks, Natalie. As the bees migrate into the top bar, would you move the entrance?
I personally would. So I would potentially provide some aeration in the Langstroth just in case. We are in Texas after all, but I would close up the traffic, the flow to the Langstroths, forcing them through the top bar addition, basically, if you'd like, to entice them to build a lot faster. That's what I would do. But Les, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it's, a lot of times we have that idea that if you're going to move a hive, you need to move it either 3 feet or 3 miles. And the same is true about the entrance. If you change the entrance, it's kind of like a day's worth of confusion for them. Mm-hmm. So then I go ahead and say, okay, we're going to touch this box. And now we're going to go through this new box. And that gets them over there and used to that new box, because eventually I'm going to want to get rid of the Langstroth box and just have them in a top bar hive, used to going in and out of the top bar hive.
You are.
Change the entrance.
Right. You are. Not everybody wants to get rid of their Langstroth. I guess that's the whole purpose of this one. But yeah, I know we are changing everything to top bars.
Yeah, to me, Langstroth is a hive that needs converting, but I feel sorry for them. They're in their straitjacket and they need to get out. I consider foundation like a straitjacket. When you force them into a cell size, that is actually not doing them any favor. I mean, they live with it, but I love to see bees able to build their own comb, whatever size they want. And that's a big motivation. What you mentioned about putting the brood to one side and the honey to the other, so that they continue the brood over into the conversion, the new comb, that's really good and important. And and it does need to be done in a honey flow. And right now we're entering into a potential dearth. Where I have a flow really starting up again is on the east side because of cotton. We got a lot of people growing cotton, and it's just now coming into full bloom. And cotton even has what they call extra floral nectaries. So there are places where the plant makes nectar, where the leaf comes out of the stem, where the little stem that the leaf is on comes out of the main stem of the plant. There's a little bit of nectar there, so the cotton's going to make a little bit of honey for a while, and we can keep converting on that. But it is kind of a flywheel effect. So if you have a lot of bee energy in a double-story Langstroth hive, you can't expect them to convert and change gears and slam everything into a new comb right away. They've got to wear down all that energy and tap it off into the new section at the top bar section. And for a while, you're going to have brood in both fairly close to each other always. But then we're going to try to eventually convert it all to the top bar. And that's where eventually we put the queen excluder in and just keep her over there where, because the brood winds up being the heart of the colony.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's like the future of the colony. Without brood, the colony is doomed. And that's what all the bees often say, that, you know, when a bee goes out on a foraging trip, she cuts herself off from the colony and she's out there doing her thing and she's just an individual bee. As soon as she comes back, she exchanges food with her sisters in the trophylactic exchange. And she right away knows how hungry all the brood is, how well the queen is doing, how many drones are in the colony. She knows everything about that colony through that trophylactic exchange. She knows it's a tremendous unifying factor that the bees have to keep up with each other, and it helps them coordinate their activity and be truly the superorganism that they are, and to each fill their job in the right way. And the brood is very important to them because it exudes hormones that lets them feel like they have a future, because they're all about to die and be replaced by whatever's in the brood.
And this being said, we're not saying everybody needs to convert their Langstroth. We're just giving you one way to do this. And we personally will convert all of our Langstroths to top bars, but the very large colonies, we don't want to necessarily take them down for Langstroth. So that's why we came up with some of that. You don't want to have to split it 5 frames at a time, have that many queens, and it's just kind of you're making it weaker if you split it. So that was the purpose of that whole, just leave your large Langstroths as big, you know, producing units, basically brood factories, and just benefit from that to make your growth in the top bar. So Matt's asking a question, Les. I have 5 top bar hives and 3 empty and ready to go. So I feel like I have enough hives to expand my apiary without needing to buy new nooks. That's the thing. Once you have enough bees, you don't need to buy bees anymore. So it's not obvious to me what the benefit of a conversion hive would be for me, but it seems like it would be interesting just for fun or learning. Other than converting to and from nooks, are there other reasons that I might want to have a top bar to Langstroth conversion hive? If you already have top bar hives and you're able to produce, you know, splits and grow from your top bar hives, I don't see the benefit unless it's for curiosity reasons. Les, what do you think?
Yeah, if you're already in top bars, you've already evolved to the profession of beekeeping. You don't need to go back. I'm being kind of mean about it, I suppose there. But no, you don't keep everything the same. It's best. It's frustrating when, I really need to divide this hive, but all I've got is they're all in deep frames, and all I've got is shallow boxes, or I've got a Langstroth that needs dividing, but all I have is top bars to put it in. It's nice if everything fits. Everything you got is all fits together and you can exchange the comb. So there's no advantage to you. If you're already all top bar, there's no need to buy some Langstroth and convert to top bar. And yeah, I totally agree with you. If you're able to, the best bees you can get are bees you can raise yourself, or get your bees to raise for themselves. Because that's breeding bees in your neighborhood for your neighborhood. And it's always fun to try like some Russians or some Carniolans or whatever it is you want to read about and try. But keep in mind that wherever they're bred, they're going to be more adapted to that area than they were to where you're bringing them to. And that the best bees you can probably breed for yourself are bred right in your own neighborhood.
Right. And there's no silver bullet, basically. There's not one size fit all. There's not, super bees out there, the this line and that line and this genetics. And it's all about the fitness, by the way, of your queens, right? So how well they were raised, how well they were fed when they were growing up. Yes, the genetics play a role, but I think that the locality of the level of locality of your queens play a bigger role, because they're going to be more adapted to your local cycles of weather and forage. And that, combined with how well she got mated, which is directly linked to how well she was fed and raised when growing up, that's going to be probably the best criteria for you to be successful, along with nutrition, obviously, and minimization of the stress factors such as pesticides and disruptions and things like that. But do you guys have questions? By the way, we talk a lot, and I've got a couple, so I'm gonna lower Richard's hands. He was on first, and then I'll take a question from Brad. Go ahead, Richard.
Natalie, when I first built the new top bar hybrid, what I was hoping was they would go to the top bar, and then somehow, some way on the nuke side, make it into like a nuke factory where I could extract honey, pollen, and brood, obviously, put it in a nuke again, and then sell it. That's what I was thinking.
But you were thinking the other way. Yeah.
But the bees will not do what I ask. So is that even possible?
What are you trying to do? You're trying to get them to build into both sections and then raise queen cells. In other words, you're going to have to get them to raise queen cells. You're going to need queens for both, right? And then, so the only way I could see that working is if they do raise queen cells in one, then you separate them, let the queen cells emerge. You separate it like a little mating nuke at that point, or a big mating nuke. I don't know, that seems complicated to me.
So the principles are going to be the same in reverse. The only thing is that your colonies haven't been in there for very long, right? They're fairly recent. They're not fully established.
They've been in there a little over a year, and I thought about this scheme before I even had bees. In a perfect world, which apparently doesn't necessarily work that way.
So it might also prefer the top bar and storing only food in those nukes, right?
I'm sorry, say again?
It might also prefer the top bar section with the natural comb and might only backfill with food in the Langstroth part.
So far, that hasn't worked that way. I'm actually struggling to get them to expand the brood to the top bar side.
Oh, it's just now starting. Okay. Did you have the honey and food in the outer side of the nuke? And did you have the brood in the nuke facing the top bar?
I didn't. I actually got bad. I shouldn't say bad. I can understand why, because everybody is used to Langstroth. But the advice I got was put the frames exactly as you got them from the nuke. So of course, I immediately honey bound myself, and
right, exactly.
I'm new. I didn't know. But my second hive, that's exactly what I did. I made sure the brood was facing the top bar side.
Did it grow faster? Did it grow into putting some brood on the top bar?
It's only been there for a little over a month, and so I don't know. I don't really know yet. And we'll find out by next year to see if they grew faster or not.
Right, and you might run out of nectar flow for the spring. You might get another growth expansion cycle on the secondary nectar flow that's in the fall in Texas. But they only build so much. Depending on where you are, if you have a lot of nectar in the fall, then they might actually build into it and have the brood in there. But I'm not sure they'll have enough time to move all the brood into the top bar, kind of a thing. Well, you don't want to, because you're trying to do splits, but it might be late in the season to do the splits. right?
Yeah, I don't think my scheme was actually possible now
You
that
know,
I have some experience.
you're better off selling top bar nukes if that's what you're trying to do. You'll
Maybe
have a
so.
lot more demand and a lot less
Really?
competition. Absolutely, especially on treatment free. Yes.
I got you. I
Yeah.
got you. And I am treatment free. Thank you.
Yeah. So you could get in Texas $350 for one of those if they're done well on the top bar nukes. Yes. So Brad, I'm sorry to make you wait. Go for it. Go for your question.
No, you didn't make me wait. As a matter of fact, some of the things that he was talking about brings up more thoughts. First off, what size hole was that y'all were drilling into the lynx trough for the transition? About a 2 or 3 inch?
3.
2 inch.
Yeah.
2 is fine. I used to do 1.5, but I'm operating on the principle that having done bee removals where they occupied 2 stud spaces right together, and I realized that there was only very tiny little holes where the siding was nailed to the stud that they were crossing. They don't need a great big giant hole to keep them connected.
Okay.
The only reason you make it a bigger hole is if they're looking like they're only storing food on the outside of the bird's nest, right? Because
Right.
you might need a bigger hole at that point. Like when you have floor joists and they're building on each side of the floor joists and they're going
Right.
through the electrical conduit little hole, they might keep their bird's nest together and not skip over to the other side if the hole is small, but the larger the hole, the more they might feel like they're willing to expand the bird's nest in the other box.
Well, that's kind of why I was asking, because when we do the nuke boxes on the for the conversion, we're cutting the whole side out. Okay. And then the second part of this is so like if I have 2 deeps and I put my frame up against my top bar transition up against that and cut the hole, should I leave both deeps on there? And I was thinking of rearranging the frame so that there's no honey on the top bar side and everything gets pushed to the far side. And then of course my top deep is mostly honey anyway. Did all that make sense?
I followed only half of it. Sorry,
I apologize. I talk fast sometimes, you know that.
It's
Okay.
me. Can you repeat though?
All right. So I have 2 deeps.
Uh-huh.
Okay. So in my thought process and listening to what y'all were just talking about is take all the honey frames in the bottom deep and move them away from the top bar side so that the brood
Yes.
is right against the top bar side. So that part I think I understood from the previous conversation.
Correct.
But what about my second deep and leaving it on there? Just leave it on there and let them use it for food until we're ready to pull it out.
Basically minimal disruption, large colony, all its strength and all its might is going to allow them to function and produce more comb faster, and for the queen to use that space. If you can plug them up with the honey around at the top and the outer edge, this way, then
Right.
you might have them wanting more space for brood. And the only way they could expand is in the top bar. You want to encourage them to put brood into the top bar if you're going to do splits.
Right. Well, that's why, that's why after listening to what he was talking about a minute ago and about the honey bound, that would make a lot more sense, is to get rid of all the honey, put it all over to the side so that the brood is up against the top bar side.
Right.
And that way they're more apt to transition and leave that honey alone.
Right. That's a very good point. Yes, and that's kind of what we recommend. So this hole, I think, is 3 inch right here. But the point with the floor joists is that usually in the conversion nuke with the easy box, the corrugated plastic is very thin, right? So what we recommend is pushing all the top bar frame, all the Langstroth frame to the easy nuke and putting just a bar in all the bars. There's nothing else, and that should be respecting the bee space enough that they will build straight on that first bar. But
okay.
The other thing that you can do, and you might actually benefit from it on the easy nukes if that's not really tight enough, is putting a spacer, and that's necessary in this context right here at the beginning before you put your first bars, because to Les's point, now all of a sudden it doesn't matter, they're resetting, they're starting back from 0, so they're going to need that space, that half bee space between that first top bar and the wall, so that they don't stick that first comb to the Langstroth part of things. But other than that, if you have that half it's a quarter of an inch, I think, thick spacer, and then you put your bars, they should build their comb straight and keep going that way.
Well, in the B space, roughly 3/8 of an inch anyway.
Yes.
Right.
Between
and so
frames.
the point of, if you have two top bars together, they have a B space in between them.
Right.
But the top bar that's up against the wall only has half a B space. So by putting that spacer in there, you get the full B space. What happens if you don't do that is that they stick that comb to the wall.
I've seen that happen
a little bit
on mine.
inconvenient.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That means you try to get it loose, that often breaks off the top bar and stays stuck to the wall. And then invariably you're looking for the queen and you can't find her and you wonder if she's back there.
Yep.
Yeah.
I want to say hi to Swarmstead Bees and my friend Bruce Rodriguez from Treatment Free Beekeepers, the Facebook group, and the Swarmstead Bees YouTube channel, who's joining us as well. So we're doing the questions and answers. If you have questions, remember to ask them either in the chat, raise your hand, or just unmute yourselves, and then we'll be able to answer. The theme today is, again, conversions from Langstroth to top bars. But I have a top bar question, Les. I've got a picture from Kathy, who has a top bar belt out, and she's got some comb in there that was apparently not covered by bees. She sent it through the chat on Zoom. It looks like a top bar with approximately half of worker comb, and you can see the darkness of the cocoon, and then on the other side it's mostly drone cells, or basically honey storage in this case. And it must have been in the back of the hive, but it's got some moldiness and blotches at the bottom of that comb on the drone size of things. And she wanted to know what that meant, if that was something that she needed to worry about, if she could reuse it, basically, Les?
You know what I do like up in California, I got more familiar with mold because in New Mexico it was usually humid, no humidity. We didn't have as much mold, but up there it was damp and wet, winters, cool. And I trust the bees to be able to sort that out. I'd go ahead and put it in and let the bees clean it, look it over, and they'll either chip it away or they'll clean it up and build onto it. And so if I'm a little bit worried about the comb, if it's full of like wax moth or hive beetles, I'd probably just toss it or melt it in the melter and see if I get anything out of it. But if it looks pretty decent, I'd go ahead and give it to the bees and let them try to sort it out.
Yep. Okay, so I want to remind you, Swarmstead Bees has a YouTube channel that's really cool. He does removals and all kinds of swarm catching. So that's something you might want to take a look at. And he's got a lot of good point about treatment-free beekeeping. And he's got a podcast also called The Mite Bomb. The Bio Beekeeper on YouTube is asking, how would you convert lots of hives from Langs to top bar? He's converting about 1,000 boxes. Les, how would you go about it if you were to do that many?
Well, I would probably set up a couple hundred conversion kits at a time and just get some clean excluder material to fill the hole with and do it in stages. I mean, it's up to you how much you have to invest in the conversion kit, because once you convert, you're not going to need. But you could probably sell the conversion kit to somebody once you're done. Yeah, and keep a few around.
Yeah. Go ahead, Liz.
Yeah, something like that. Where I'm curious to know where he's located. But
So where are you located, so we can help answer that question? Also, what I would recommend is using the plans on our be-mindful.com/plans page, and build those very simple top bar nukes, basically 4 pieces, 2 walls, a bottom floor, and an end piece, and sticking them to all those. That's not that much work to build these, especially on 1-inch lumber. And I would just pop, a bunch of top bar nukes off, populate your new top bar hives that you have time to build in the meantime. And then once you're done, you can sell all your Langstroth hives for a fortune, I guess, if you have 1,000 of them, and you'll have all your conversions done free. So that's another suggestion, right?
Yeah, I had come up with a way to palletize top bar hives, put 8 on a pallet, and for the California almonds. And that still could be made to work. There's a lot of things you could do if you could contract organic almond growers. Then it's sort of halfway tempting if you have that many.
Right. So I have another question. I've got a question from Brad, but I'm going to take real quick a question from Mac. He's got somewhat related conversion. My initial 3 nukes were 17-inch top bar nukes, and he's now have 5 hives via splits. So all of the 8 hives he's built are 17-inch. So the good news is that they're all compatible with each other. As he's done this more, he's realized that 19 top bar hives, and he's in Hays County, is more common here. I wonder why. Anyway, should I think about building any future hives as 19 inches and converting over time? Or is this really not an issue or something I should worry about as long as my apiary is self-sufficient? So what I would say is if you'd like to convert over to 19, you've got a huge market for those because there's a lot of people that are doing the 19-inch top bar hive, the Les Crowder Be Mindful style of top bar hives. So you would have a lot of customers if you were to sell splits. Obviously the 17-inch nukes don't fit those. They're too deep and too narrow. But if you're not interested in that, then it doesn't really matter. If you're interested in, if you're going to have only your own hives for yourselves and you're not going to change anything, that's an option. If you do want to convert, I would use repair bars, rescue bars, and just convert them over all at once. You might have to shave off a little bit of the bottom of those combs and the bees will do the rest. And we can walk you through that if you are interested. So that's a good question. Brad. Oh, and by the way, Les, do you have anything else to add before I ask Brad?
Go ahead. Let's see Brad.
Okay, Brad, it's up
okay.
to you.
Sorry to be jumping in again, but the one thing I forgot about was, have y'all come up with a way to put a roof onto the transfer conversion hive?
Yeah.
In other words, we have our bars and that will keep most moisture out, but normally we put a roof over the top of that for shielding for heat and everything else. And I just didn't know if y'all have already come up with something or we just need to figure something out.
We generally cut a tin corrugated roof that's 5 foot long out of two of them out of a 10-foot piece of roofing. And so it's already 6 inches too long. So it almost covers with a full length top bar hive of 48 inches divided in 2 and 2 nukes on each end. The roof still just about covers all the nukes and the hive. So it works pretty well. And then once you get rid of the nukes, you just have a regular lid.
Okay. I was thinking of my 2 deeps and stuff. I was trying to come up with something, but I think I can figure something out. And when I do, I'll take pictures.
So what you could do is put a lid that's slightly slanted over the top bar piece of this. And maybe if you want some tape to seal connection with the Langstroth, just in case, but that shouldn't be too big of an issue. Yeah.
Yeah. I was thinking about maybe catching it under the lip of the telescoping lid on the Langstroth, underneath the lip of that, and then slanting it across the top and tacking it down.
Single, you'll definitely have that. Yeah.
I just didn't know if you already had something y'all came up with, but I'll work on it. Thanks.
Okay.
To be honest with you, we haven't put bees into that. We haven't tried the whole big Langstroth colony to smaller top bar nuke conversion yet. This is a brand new as of Friday. You and I were sitting at the bus talking about it, you know it's brand new. So
I know what. See, I'm developing a field trip for y'all.
right.
So you can come over and we can convert my 3 hives.
That's right. By the way, anybody that's within distance, if you're wanting to chat, you know, ask your questions and maybe do some brainstorming. We go to the Nutty Brown bus every Friday, 11 to 6 and 4 to 6. We like to sit down and chat, and it's in Southwest Austin, obviously. So Monty, you're kind of a little far, I think. But anybody is local enough, and actually Brad is like what, 3 hours, but he was coming for the apprenticeship, so he spent an extra day to just come into the bus. So yeah,
It's just so much entertainment.
yeah. So I do not have any more questions. Do you all have any more questions? And or last, do you have any more thoughts regarding all this that we have not quite mentioned yet?
No, I mean, it's fun to experiment. I'd be curious to see what Brad comes up with. And, you know, that's how we learn. It's not all just leaders leading the way. It's all of us leading the way and talking to each other.
Right.
Changing ideas and coming up with fun things to do, and keep the fun in it. Keep it an experiment that's fun to do. I thought I might just throw in there, I've just read an article from Bee Culture magazine about the ARS Animal Research Service that said that they have developed a bee that's somewhat mite resistant. And I thought, oh my gosh, am I going to be mainstream after all? I don't know how to be mainstream. I've never had them on my side. I've always been like the one that's saying, don't use antibiotics. And then they say, no, you have to use them. And now
Right.
they finally quit that. And now they're saying, actually, you know, bees can resist the mite. We developed a bee that can resist the mite. And I was like, no, the bees developed themselves to resist
They
the
did
mite.
that themselves. That's right.
And it's not like we need a bunch of PhDs. And I should be careful.
We're right. I mean, we're thankful for the research and everything. The thing is that it's more often a better idea to try to breed against bad traits than breeding for select few traits that you're looking for, because when you do that, you impoverish the genetic pool. And I've got a question from Monty. I wanted to specify that the Bio Beekeeper on YouTube was saying that he buys business going out of business, beekeeping businesses. So he'll constantly use that conversion line to tabar. He's in Colorado and he's trying to build up to 5,000 colonies this year and to cut down on langs to make tabars. So by the way, you can inspect tabar hives so much faster than you can Langstroth. That's something to keep in mind. And we'll circle back because he wants to know how to palletize tabar hives. Leslie, we're talking about that. But first, I want to go to Monty and take his question.
Oh, thank you. Well, you know, from my having been here before that I'm a layens guy. I don't currently have a top bar hive, but it's still a relevant topic because it's very similar trying to convert from a Langstroth to the layens format.
Exactly.
And as people do that, there's different methods people have done converting, and sometimes it involves making a special frame to hold the Langstroth. Sometimes it involves cutting apart the Langstroth. And that's kind of my question is, are there any methods? I know that the top of the Langstroth frame isn't the full width of a top bar, but if you're doing a 19-inch top bar hive, is there any way of basically just cutting the frames, cutting the comb in order to fit that into the top bar hive?
So by the way,
do that all the time. People do that all the time, but I like to convert them without, because often you have to cut it to height as well, because it's the deep box is a little deeper than the top bar, and that means you often cut it right through some of the best brood, and so the end piece away or figure out what to do with it. So that's why I like to just let them build their own conversion and then just put the queen excluder in. But yeah, you're right. It's very similar.
So I want to specify Monty, Brad, Monty meet Brad, Brad meet Monty. You both are Lions people. So if you have you want to brainstorm, that's a good way to do this. You can chat a little bit. But to give my version of the answer is that I've seen people remove and keep just the top bar of the Langstroth and remove the other edges, the wooden parts, and cut the frame to fit the top bar. However, I would say especially if you have a natural comb on your Langstroth, you can cut straight in the middle, in the center of that big rectangle once, and then cut out deep enough that it fits in your top bar. So basically removing a little bit of the honey at the top and just keeping the brood, which you don't want to hang that honey part on the rescue bars anyway, and you don't want it to drip on that brood anyway, right? So if you split it in half, you have basically two rectangles that you can hang each on a rescue bar into your top bar hive. Now it's going to be a rectangle and it's not going to have that shape, but you're not going to have lost the edges. It's just one, you keep all the brood. We just did that during the apprenticeship, doing a cutout, and it was one way to not be as traumatic when you cut through the comb and not be as wasteful if you're doing it that way. So that's kind of, but for lay-ins, I'm guessing you could do the same thing and attach a lay-ins nuke to a Langstroth, or attach Langstroth nuke to a lay-ins hive and do the same principle. Horizontal expansion works for lay-ins and top bars and long lengths just the same way. Although with long lengths, you don't need to convert anything, right? You just pop them in, right? So great questions. And then what was I going to say? Oh, here's another tip, by the way. When you're doing the Langstroth nuke to large top bar conversion, and Richard, that might be something you might be interested in, by the way, is instead of having 5 frames into that Langstroth nuke, and you can either harvest one of honey, or if you have a frame feeder, remove it, and then you have only 4 frame in your 5 frame box, right? So you have the brood that's going to the top bar hive, and the first and second frame there, you can spread them apart and put a bar in between those 2 Langstroth frames for them to start building natural comb. They will start building in the shape of a catenary curve. That's kind of like the shape that you hold a string or a chain with your fingers, and it's just going to follow that mathematical shape. Well, if you don't wait too long, then you can transfer that over straight into your top bar, and you can keep doing it because that's going to be brood, right? So that's going to entice them to build that brood's nest into the top bar. That's another trick, by the way.
That's what I do now, except I build my nuke to have 5 frames and 1 top bar. So it's wide enough that I can put that top bar in there whenever I install the nuke.
Right.
So that makes sense, and it definitely works.
Right. And then if they build, if you don't come back fast enough and they build that whole rectangle,
I gotta cut.
Then you can cut and use the rescue bars.
Unfortunately, I've had to do it.
Don't do it that way. Don't do it that way. Just do it straight in the center and use it as 2. Yeah.
Fortunately, I caught it early enough that I only had to trim half an inch. It wasn't too bad.
Oh, then that's okay. Yeah, it depends. You got to adjust to the situation that you're faced with. But if you've got the entire rectangle built out, I would not waste those corners. We just cut in half, personally. But
it's another one of those worst of both, where you put the top bars and then leave them in there, and then you attach them to the walls and to the bottom or to the next come over, and then they're full of honey, and you just make a big mess.
Right.
Well, so I actually have left 1 top bar there, and it's grown completely, and they haven't attached it to anything. I haven't had an issue so far.
Oh, good.
So we have 5 minutes. We can take some suggestions for the theme for next week. If you guys have ideas, if you got things that you want to talk about next time, because if you leave it to us, we're going to talk top bars. We're going to talk, conversions. We're going to talk about things like this, right? So if you want to talk about other things, in particular, if you're not top bar beekeepers and you're mostly Langstroth or even Layons, beekeepers. We do all of it. So you might as well kind of give us a theme that we work with for you, or we have other, we have some more time for questions. So either or. Brad, jump in.
Yeah, one of the things is hive balancing. We've done it in class, but I think it's extremely valuable on moving brood around, moving resources around. And so maybe that would be a good topic.
That's
You may
a
have
good-
talked about it in the past. I didn't get to do some of your others.
No, we talk occasionally about that, but we need I mean, what do you think, Les? That would be a good topic, right? How to share resources.
That's a good idea.
Right. So I'm writing it down. In the meantime, Les, the bio beekeeper was asking about how to palletize the top bar hives. So I wanted to circle back to that while people are thinking about either more themes or more questions for our last 4 minutes.
Well, I did pollinate almonds with top bar hives for about 10 years. And what I did is I put a partition in the middle of the top bar hive, a 44-inch long. I had made it that long so that 2 would fit on the back of a truck. So I built the hive to make them so that they could be hauled to California. But so they're 44 inches long, partitioned in the middle, entrances at both ends, so that each box contained 2 hives. And then you just put 2 boxes down on a pallet, screw it right to the pallet. So now you have 4 on the pallet, and then you position the 2 boxes on top of those 2 boxes going the other direction so that they fit right on top. Now you have 8 on that pallet, and just leave it at that. Just leave it at the 8 double top bar hives. That means you have to take the top ones off to get to the bottom ones, but it could be done easily enough in a pollination scene. And then when you got them back, you could take them off and put them each in their own pallet. But that would be a way to pollinize top bar hives. When I pollinated the almonds in California with top bar hives, I didn't have them palletized, and it was a matter of just getting up, and I just had the individual boxes stacked 5 high, and I just lifted them with somebody else off the truck one at a time. But I only got up to about 200 hives that I moved for pollination. So I didn't really try to, palletize it and get a forklift and that whole bit, but it could be done. I've often said you can do anything you can think of in a Langstroth we can do in a top bar hive.
And by the way, the Bio Beekeeper on YouTube, if you want to run ideas past us or ask us questions, we would love to see you work 5,000 top bar hives and tell us what you think. So it would be fantastic to have finally a large commercial size top bar beekeeping operation in the United States. So we're all about helping you out being successful if you are willing to get our ideas and our feedback on some of this stuff, right? I've got question from Mac. Oh, by the way, I sent you the link to our plans if you want to convert to the 19-inch standard that we're building in Texas, because we're very big on building that standard with those hives. His question is positioning of hives in the apiary. Oh, those are all subjects. So there's another theme for next time. Best ways to make repairs to top bar hive, especially replacing the legs, which by the way, I need to do for the barrel hives. So, or even transporting top bar hives that are already on legs. You have a full colony. What do we do when we need to load it up on the truck, right? We can't really load it all up with the legs because then we have to tilt it, right? So what are the strategies for next time we can use for that? I've written it down. And then Mac says, positioning those hives in the apiaries, how much to spread them out, where to orient the hives. Usually we say south, and then if you south to southeast, right, Les?
Right.
What's your take on that?
Yeah, and if you can locate them in afternoon shade.
Oh, absolutely.
Particularly when now in the hot weather, afternoon shade is valuable to the bees and the beekeeper.
Oh, well, that was the rest of his question. Importance or not of afternoon shade in Texas and north wind breaks. So if you in doubt, I would put the hives in full shade. If you have afternoon shade, that's great as well. Full sun, it starts being stressful on both the bees and the beekeepers, right? So just keep that in mind. If you are concerned about small hive beetles, which is why a lot of times people say put them in the full sun or more sun than shade, the problem is not so much the sun, I think. It's the ground underneath your hives. And if it's too rich and malleable, and the small hive beetles have an easy time going and digging and pupating under there, that's your issue more than the sun, as far as I'm concerned. And that's logical, because in some of those shady area, if it's in a low ground kind of a context, you have a lot of humidity, then you have a lot of leaves falling down, and it's a lot of compost on the ground. That's what the problem is. But if it's in a dry ground and they can't get through, then they can be in full shade. So you might put a barrier, a mechanical barrier, whether it's finely crushed limestone or landscaping fabric or some, gravel or something that's going to stop those small hive beetles larvae, kind of a thing. So yes, thank you for those suggestions. With that, Les, we have a few ideas, and I'm copying them down so that we have good starting themes for next time. Do you have any more thoughts? And while I'm saying that, I wanted to say, the bio beekeeper says, yeah, he's probably going to go making nukes and honey versus pollination, but he'll keep that in mind so we can help him out. But thank you so much, everyone, for your outstanding questions and for attending again tonight. The Chat with the Mindful Beekeepers come back next week on Mondays, and every Mondays when it's not a major holiday, we'll be happy to answer all your questions and chat bees with you guys from all over the place, right, Monty? And Brad, where you guys are probably the furthest today. But Les, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and your expertise tonight again.
Well, thank you, Natalie, and good to see everybody. And I hope to see y'all here and there and everywhere. Bye-bye.
Bye, guys. Have a good week.